75 metres underwater on the remains of a German First World War submarine. I'm part of a team of divers who are trying to solve not one but two underwater mysteries. The wreck is located off the Lizard Peninsula in an area that's littered with shipwrecks. It was a notorious hunting ground for German submarines during the First World War, but is also battered by fierce tides and strong currents, making it extremely challenging to dive. If you've watched any of my other videos, and of course I hope you have, you're in for something different this time. It's not me wielding the camera, it's my friend Fran. She's got a paralens mounted on her head, and she'll be videoing the dive. If you see a diver with yellow gloves on, that's me. As if on cue, you're about to see me come into view. There I am. It's all a bit dangly. I've got my camera hanging off me and also the small lifting bag that we're going to be using to put on the shot at the end. Today, we're the last pair in the water. This dive is really well planned. There's a group of teams and we've each got our own objective to do when we get to the bottom. Ours is to go to the prop and to try and scrub it and find if there's any information on it. You can see that's why we've got a bag full of tools and also several cameras to record what we find. The other thing that's different about today's dive is the shot line. It's top tensioned, i.e. it uses a weight in order to make sure that the shot line is completely vertical. You can see the weight and the shot line coming down from the buoy just in the top left of the screen. The advantage of this setup is that you don't need to travel as far in a horizontal distance, which you sometimes get when there's a long shot line and a bit of tide running. It's all about personal preference really, and that's what we decided on. That's what the skipper set up today. Anyway, we're carrying on in the descent and you can see that visibility is pretty good. There's also a reasonable amount of ambient light, which is always quite nice. This wreck was first dived in 2006 and found to be a large World War I German submarine. Using this information and Royal Navy sinking reports, Innes McCartney identified it as the SMU 95. This attribution stood until some French divers dived on a similar submarine which was believed to be the wreck of U-95's sister, the U-93. The French divers scrubbed the prop and found some numbers on it that were after the launch of U-93 but before the launch of U-95. It was generally felt that props were fitted before launch and therefore the suggestion was that the French had found the U-95, which meant that this submarine that we're diving on today was probably the U-93. Therefore, the first mystery that we're trying to solve today is to identify the submarine that we're currently descending towards. As you can see though, Fran's got a problem much nearer to home. For some reason her camera doesn't seem to be playing. She's trying to get that fisheye lens into the right place to take photos. I'll be honest, I admire her bravery because that isn't clipped onto her in any way whatsoever. The seabed's nearly 40 metres below her, and if she drops it, it's probably gone forever, and that's quite a bit of money. She's a cracking diver though, Fran, and you can see she's obviously solved her problem. She's clipping it back on, and she's cracking on with the dive. The other mystery we're trying to solve today is to try and find what sunk this submarine. In the First World War, the Royal Navy received many sinking claims from different sources. A surprisingly large number of submarines were sunk by ramming, although the Royal Navy only credited one merchant ship with doing this. That was the RMS Olympic, sister ship of the very famous Titanic, which sunk SMU 103 in May 1918. Earlier in the year, the SS Braineel had also claimed to have rammed and sunk a German submarine off the Lizard Peninsula, but this was discounted by the Royal Navy. Part of our mission today is to find out if there's any evidence that this is the submarine that was attacked and sunk by the Bray Neal. Before that though, we need to do our bottom of the shot line admin. You can see we're not the first divers on the wreck today. There's been lots of divers ahead of us and their strobes are on there. In fact, one diver has already completed his mission and is heading back up. The quality of this video isn't as good as some of my other ones, and I apologise for that. It's mainly because there aren't any video lights, so it's just reliant on the individual torches that we're all carrying. Fran's just turned hers on, and you can see there the submarine starting to come into view. Pretty much the first thing we see is the deck gun. The rest of the thin outer hull has rotted away, leaving just the pressure hull. The Germans preferred to use deck guns wherever possible. Torpedoes were expensive, unreliable, and even a submarine of this size didn't carry many. So if they could, they'd have used a deck gun or a boarding party which would have carried explosive charges. By the time the SMU-95 was sunk in 1918 though, there was a significant amount of danger on the surface. Lots of fast destroyers, Q ships which were merchantmen with disguised weapons on board. There was loads of small trawlers, and even at this point airships and planes were being used against submarines. Added together, there was a high level of threat, and survival rates amongst submarines and submariners was really low. Returning to the dive, you can see that Fran has spotted the ready use ammunition in between the gun and the conning tower. So we know where we are, and we're about to swim towards the stern of the vessel. Our mission is to scrub the prop. Some of the other divers have got different things. Photography, photogrammetry, these are all tasks given to members of the team. And once we're on the surface, the evidence is going to be put together to try and build a picture of what actually happened. You can see that the wreck is lying on its port side, and lots of things have fallen off onto the seabed. Various bits of pipe and pressure vessels that have contained things like air for blowing the ballast tanks. I'm in front of Fran, but we're both moving towards the stern, taking the opportunity to see whatever we can. It's really interesting. People often think that submarines are big and solid, and the interior of them, the pressure hull is, but the pressure hull is always wrapped in a thin outer coating of metal onto which things are mounted, and it's also the bit that people walk. What that means is that when they rust and decay underwater, the outer hull falls away, leaving the pressure hull remaining. And what we're looking at the moment with all these ribs and stuff, that's the remnants of the exterior hull, i.e. the not pressure bit. Underneath it, as you'll see, is the pressure hull that remains significantly intact. Although later on in the dive, we'll see that one of the hatches is open, and therefore the interior is flooded, and probably always has been. When the Bray Neal submitted its sinking report, it claimed after it had rammed the submarine to have heard foreign voices in the darkness. Now, we can only speculate, but those may well have been German sailors who'd escaped out of the conning tower, which is where the hatch is open, and were then left to freeze in the water in January 1918, which is when it was believed to have been rammed. Now, you may think that's pretty terrible of the crew of the SS Bray Neal not to pick up the submariners or the people in the water that they could hear. And to be honest, viewed from over 100 years away, I think that's a reasonable perspective. Viewed from the people on board the SS Bray Neal, I think that's very understandable. So many ships and so many merchant mariners had died at that point. I can imagine they felt the urge to have a bit of revenge. Anyway, we've arrived at the stern, and you can see the prop there. It's actually in a really good position for scrubbing. It's standing well clear of the bottom so we can get around it. On one of my other submarine prop scrubbing videos, you'll see that we can't get to parts of the prop, but this one was really easy. As you can see, Fran's got an ice scraper, the kind of thing you'd use for the car. It's making short work of the vegetation and concretion that's on that prop. I'm next to her. You can see my yellow gloves. Once she's cleared the worst bits of it away using the ice scraper, she's going to give it to me, and I'm going to have a go at some of the other blades while she gets out the big Brillo pad and tries to clear the concretion off. We know there's 3 bits of the prop that we need to work on, so we're working together to try and do as much as possible during the limited time that we've got. Right there, she's handed it over to me. She's opening up a string bag of goodies. In there she's got a wire brush and some large Brillo pads. Undoing knots is surprisingly difficult wearing 5mm gloves like Fran's got on there, but she's actually doing a pretty good job. I think the first item out is going to be the wire brush. Yeah, here it comes. Once again, she's going to be using that to kind of crack on and clear as much as she can out. What we're really hoping for is some numbers or an inscription on there. Only one face had anything on. So as soon as we find a face with something on, we know we can stop doing on the others and concentrate on it. Very shortly, we're going to get the good news that this is the face that's got the numbers on. It's the best one. It's the easiest to get to, and it's going to be the easiest to take photographs of and all that kind of stuff as well. So she's just clearing it off at the moment. Although the light's pretty good down here, it's not good enough to see the letters or numbers, but as soon as she shines a torch on there, she can see it. I've been working on the other 2 faces, the ones underneath. She's given me the nudge. We now know that we don't need to bother doing that. We can just concentrate on this one. She can clearly see that there's stuff on there. So it's just a case of getting it clean enough now so that we can actually read what they say. And this will be the stuff that's really crucial for our research. So she's got it to a good enough point now. Wire brush is going away. There's a big Brillo pad coming out. Those are normally used on the props of yachts and large vessels. One of the team works as a commercial diver, so he does this for a business. And he's managed to borrow a couple of these, which is what we're using now. And you can see once again, it's clearing all the stuff off, and it's going to make it easy for us to see what's down there. It's actually a really good result. We've only been underwater for 10 minutes maybe, and already we've found the prop with the information on that we're going to want, and we know we're going to be able to clean it up and get the information. Even better is that this is actually the first dive of 2 that we've got planned, so we know we're going to be able to concentrate on this prop. You can see Fran there is sufficiently confident she actually thinks she can read it. I'm shining some light on for her to try and help, so she doesn't need to bother doing that. She's clearly had enough though, so she's going to hand it over to me and going to give me the opportunity to have a go. She's moving out of the way. You can see there I am. She's made some wise choices in terms of gloves. I've got dry gloves on, which aren't the best for this sort of thing. I'm probably going to end up with a hole in them, and therefore flooded glove, flooded up my arm. Fran hasn't bothered with that. She's got wet gloves on, which are much more robust for kind of underwater manual labour. It's a lesson I'd like to say I learnt, but I've done the same on every other prop scrubbing dive that I've been on as well. There you go. You see, we're working together, trying to expose as much detail as possible. Scrubbing props doesn't make for particularly great videos, but I don't like to cut my videos so you can actually see what it's like, what we're doing. While we're doing this though, it might just be worth giving you a bit of information about SMU 95. It sunk 14 ships over the course of 6 war patrols. It was active from June 1917 until January 19 when it was sunk, which is just under 7 months. Incredible how short its service history was, but how much destruction it wreaked in that time. I think about 38,000 tons of ships, so not of a massive amount in the scope of the time, but still, inflicted a lot of damage, a lot of misery. No doubt the sailors on board the SS Braineel were well aware of this kind of thing, and that's why I don't think they showed much mercy to the German submariners once they realised they were in the water. So a brutal, brutal period for everybody involved in this conflict. And something that's pretty much forgotten these days. I think when we tend to think of submarines, we tend to think of the Second World War, all those U-boats, all those convoys, but actually there was far more ships sunk in the First World War, far more submarines sunk, and far more people killed. So we should probably know a bit more about the First World War. From a diving perspective, most of the ships and the submarines sunk in the First World War tended to be closer into shore, so there's the added bonus that there's far more ships and submarines accessible by technical divers. So, from my perspective, that's quite a good thing. I'm never going to be diving ships and submarines sunk out in the middle of the Atlantic. So we've stopped our cleaning now. We think we've cleaned enough to get some decent photos. You can see I'm actually turning on the video lights on my camera. It would have been nicer if I'd have turned those on earlier on. It certainly made it easier to see with the video and given better quality video. Fran's also got out her notebook, and I think in a moment she's going to tell me to write down whatever I see on there. It's really important that we go up with as many records as we can. We've got the photos, we've got our memories, and we've got whatever's written down on that piece of paper there. I know it can be difficult for people to orientate themselves when looking at videos, but at the top of the screen here you can see the propeller, and the shaft that is coming sort of bottom right, that's coming from inside the submarine and ultimately goes to the engine. So where I am at the moment with my yellow gloves, that's near the stern, and behind me is the rudder. That's where we've been scrubbing the prop from, and that's the best place for reading the numbers and letters, not least because that's the way they're orientated. So you can see there I've got my camera, I've got the video lights, I'm making sure that I've got it, I'm getting it all videoed. Obviously there's something in the way of one of the numbers, so I'm trying to clean it out of the way. Fran wanted to have a go at it, but I'm not letting her have any of that. Earlier on I mentioned that the dates on the props are important, and they're the things that allow us to have a good guess at what the submarines are. Now, once you see me write down the dates on that bit of paper, I'm going to go into a bit of an explanation about how they are useful and how they allow us to have a best guess at which submarine is which. First of all though, I need to do a bit more scrubbing. Clearly we haven't done a good enough job. But you can, even in this video now, you can see how clear the letters are. I wonder if the people who fitted this prop over 100 years ago had any idea that the next time those letters and numbers would be seen would be by some divers on the wreck, and that they would be used to identify the submarine and therefore the last resting place of the 34 men and 4 officers who went down when this boat was sunk. I'm ex-army and I've served in conflict. Nothing like the First World War, of course, but I do feel a sense of kinship with the people who lost their lives fighting for their country. I don't agree with their cause, and we would have been on different sides in the conflict. But the fact is, you've got to feel for people who died while fighting for their country. These would have been young men with their whole lives ahead of them, and all of that was gone. Part of the waste of war, I think. Don't think there's much appetite amongst German people to find out what happened to relatives who died and were lost in the First World War. But if there are people out there looking, it's nice to think that by identifying this wreck, we'll have helped them find out where their relative is. This is actually really hard work, scrubbing props like this. And you can see I've swapped from my right hand to my left hand because I'm starting to get fatigued. You can also probably see that the actual brass is starting to come through, or probably bronze, I'm sure someone will correct me. As you can see, this isn't a particularly exciting job, and there wasn't a big queue of people to do it. But there's other people, other members of the team who are doing jobs that aren't particularly interesting either. One of the guys is swimming up and down with a video camera, trying to get every part of the wreck, and that is going to be stuck into a computer later on to do some photogrammetry. And as you'll see towards the end of my dive, that proves really useful, because one of the things it does is give us a really strong clue as to what sunk the wreck. I'm not going to steal the thunder from later on, just to say I think it's a really good clue. So if you hang on towards the end of my video, you'll see that. Clearly Fran's getting bored with just providing the light. She's also dived in with the wire brush to try and help. I think both of us are at the point now where we just want to get this part of the task done, clean it off, get the numbers sorted, because once we've done that we can swim around the rest of the wreck. I think we all want to have a good look around it. Neither of us has dived a submarine of this type before, so it'll be a really interesting thing to do. We've obviously seen the gun already, we've seen all the ready use ammunition, we've been past the conning tower. Those are all areas that we both want to go back to. But first things first, got to get the numbers sorted, got to finish off our mission and make sure that we go back up with the information that the rest of the dive team need. So I think we're pretty much there. So I've just asked Fran to take some photos. I'm going to be taking some more photos. I'm trying to get real close-ups there. I want those photos to be as high definition as possible, so if there's any ambiguity we can zoom in on them or whatever. I'm not sure where Fran's going. Maybe just have a look at the wreck. Where she is at the moment is what would be underneath the submarine. You can see that piece of metal. That's the skeg that would stop the prop banging on the bottom, and the rudder was actually off to the left hand side. Okay, you can see I'm writing down the numbers now. Fran's putting all the kit away. So I think we've decided that we've done enough scrubbing for one day. Certainly I've seen enough video of scrubbing. It's not nearly as exciting as actually doing the scrubbing. There you go, you can see what I've written on there. U93 to 98 and the date 25th of January 1917. That's what's written on the prop. Those are the crucial pieces of information we're going to take up with us. But good news, we finished. So we can now crack on. There's the prop shaft you can see going back into the hull. Fran's going to obviously put that notebook away somewhere. We don't want to lose it with that vital piece of information in. While she's doing that, I think I'm probably taking some photos. I seem to recall that I've got a really good one of her at this point. Fran's also a really keen photographer, and although she doesn't have any lighting on this rig, there's actually sufficient ambient light down here for her to get some decent photos. It's also quite handy that I've got video lights and I'm lighting up the area. What you can see she's doing first of all though is sorting out the white balance. If she doesn't do that, all her photos are just going to look red from the torches. So there you go, she's just sorted out the white balance. You saw it go from red to white. She's now getting a few snaps. That's me with the prop, or really just I guess going past the rudder, and we're now going to go over the top of the wreck. It's actually really pretty. You can see there's dead men's fingers all over it. There's a high level of marine growth. Almost certainly this is due to the strong currents that pass over this wreck several times a day. They keep it clean by getting rid of any dirt and also provide a high level of nutrient for the animals that grow on the wreck. Just there on the seabed you can see there's some mooring bollards. They would have been on the outer hull of the wreck, which clearly as it's deteriorated they've fallen off. There's a couple of divers down the other end. Fran's taking the opportunity to get a photo, and then we're swimming back along the hull, back towards the gun that we saw earlier and the conning tower. You can also see there's a fair bit of ropes and stuff on this wreck. Almost certainly it would have been potted by local fishermen, and therefore they'd have got stuff tangled and it would have been abandoned here. Not too many nets though, which is really good and quite unusual. It's relatively rare for a wreck in this area not to have loads and loads of netting on it. You can see there Fran is just getting close to the gun. I'm not sure what that circle is on the deck. All sorts of bits of machinery and stuff you can see inside the hull, and there is the gun. I believe that's an 88mm. I think there was one of these on the stern and a slightly larger 105 one forward of the conning tower. I don't think we ever get there on this dive, though we did do on the second dive. When I look at things like this, I just wonder how many times it was used in anger. How many ships did that gun sink? I'll wager it was quite a few. Now it's just really pretty. And then we're back to the stern of the gun. Is going to be all that ready use ammunition that we saw on the seabed. For those of you who don't know, the submarines in this period, they had shells in effectively sealed containers that were kept underneath the deck, so between the outer deck and the pressure hull, and they were there for when they got to the surface and they needed ammunition quickly. They would literally lift up the floorboards of the deck, access the ammunition, take it out of its waterproof container. They could then fire it and then dispose of it once it was done. And you can see there's racks of them lying on the deck. I don't know how many there is, maybe 30, 40, I guess. Quite a lot anyway, which probably shows the amount, an indication of the amount of times they thought they'd be required. Franz decided to get a photo of me and the ready use ammunition. That's all good. And just behind her is going to be the conning tower. And I think that's the next item on our agenda, is to go up and have a look at it. Have a look at the periscopes and the hatch that I've already told you is open. Like the rest of the submarine, the conning tower was part pressure hull and part outer skin. So lots of the debris that we can see at the moment, or lots of the valves and fittings and stuff, would have been in between the outer skin and the pressure hull. So it's one of the things, when you look at submarines, they don't look like you expect them to look. And that's because the outer skin that you've normally seen in pictures is gone, and there's only the inner pressure hull left. The first few times you dive on older submarines, this is quite confusing, and it's not until someone points it out and explains why they look the way they look that it all makes sense. So once again, a bit of outer skin there that we've just seen. There's the conning tower off to the left hand side, and Fran is going to go up on top. At the front of it, as you would expect, is some periscopes. There's also actually a little observation post. Quite difficult to see, but it was there. And that would have allowed the people inside to get some observation without using the periscope. Fran's at the very front of the conning tower. One of the two periscopes is in front of her. She's going to swim behind them in a second, and you can see I'm already there looking into the hatch. The hatch is interesting, as I've already mentioned, because it is open. Now, I don't think that's something that would have been very easy to do from any depth. Certainly, a diver couldn't have opened it. It's just too difficult to do, especially if there was pressure inside. So I think it's fairly reasonable to say that this hatch was opened either when it was sinking or very shortly after it was sunk. You can look inside and you can see that the hatch into the rest of the submarine is open as well. To me, this just looks like a load of people trying to get off a submarine as it was sinking. All the hatches are open. Everybody's just trying to abandon ship as quickly as they possibly can. Certainly no diver would have got in through the hatch that Fran is currently sticking her camera inside, and it wouldn't be possible to open it. I think that hatch opens downwards anyway, with the seal on the other side of it. So this has been opened from inside the submarine, and I think it offers a fairly compelling level of evidence that the crew abandoned this submarine as it was sinking. Really sad to think about that, of course. It's January, water's freezing cold, and they're then into the sea. If we believe that the SS Braineel sunk it and rammed it, then even the poor guys who managed to survive and get out are then going to freeze to death or very quickly drown in the cold weather that you would get on a January day. It's really sobering to think about that. This dive is in June. I'm wearing a load of layers underneath my dry suit, I've got an electric heating system, and even then, towards the end of my dive, I'm going to start feeling cold. I can't imagine what it would have been like in oilskins or whatever they wore inside submarines, which presumably wasn't very much, as I think they were kind of fairly hot, noisy spaces, and then to go from that into a January sea at night just doesn't even bear thinking about. So Fran's continuing to record, take pictures. Once again, you see she's doing it without any light. It just shows how much ambient light we've got down here, even at 70 metres. It's a really, really nice day. It's a really good conditions for doing a dive like this. Even now, there's no light. Her torch isn't on, and you can see that there's enough light to kind of make out where you're going. Anyway, she's got her torch back on. I think she's just looked at her computer a few times. She realises that it's getting towards the end of the dive, so it's time to head back to the shot. We were the last pair on this dive, and one of our tasks was to fill up a lifting bag, small lifting bag that's attached to the bottom of the shot, and that's just to help the skipper get it back on board the boat whilst we're doing our decompression. So she's looking for the shot. Now, it's not actually where we left it. It has moved, and if you have a look when we do find it in a minute or two, you'll see that it's slowly bouncing along the seabed. This is one of the issues with a top tension shot. Once the current starts picking up or you get a bit of waves, the top tension will actually reduce the weight of the shot and therefore make it easier for it to be moved. You've just got to be careful of that. Normally, you'll have seen on my other dives, we actually tie the shot into the wreck. We didn't do that on this dive, and I'm not 100% certain why. It was just the protocol we agreed. But anyway, you can see that Fran spotted the strobes, she spotted the shot, and you can see that that lifting bag that I carried down with me. I left it down there, ready for exactly this moment. You can also see the shot is dragging along the seabed. You can see there's a bit of it's under a bit of tension there. The current must be starting to pick up. So, and you can see the drag marks in the seabed there as well. Clear evidence it's moving. So Fran's going to go down. She's going to unroll the lifting bag, and there's a little crack bottle on it that she's going to fill, and that will. She's not going to completely fill it, just enough to make it easy for the skipper to start moving it, start lifting it, and then once he gets it off the seabed a bit, obviously Boyle's law will come into effect, and it will start to expand, and then it will make it easier and easier till eventually it goes all the way up to the surface. There's the crack bottle on the DSB. You can see she's putting a little bit of air in, not enough, so that it actually lifts off the bottom, as I said, and there we go. She's heading back up. You can see there's a little bit of gas in there. Maybe it's, I don't know, a fifth full. There I am. Arms on my video lights everywhere. I could probably do to tuck those in. No doubt that's something I'll do on my deco stop. And we're starting to head back up now. Next item on the agenda is going to be to collect our strobes, and then we'll be ascending up towards the lazy shot. As we come up, you can see it's getting lighter and lighter, which is always nice. You get a real sense of going home when the water starts to lighten like that. I also haven't turned my camera off. Once again, that's all admin that I'm going to do when I get up onto the shot. So there are our strobes. By the looks of things, Fran has dropped down onto mine. I think I'm going to let her get it first, and then we'll go from there. In fact, that looks as though there's somebody else's strobe, so it would appear that somebody else has left their strobes on the shot line. Don't know why that is. We're definitely the last divers off the wreck, so don't know what's going on there. So we're heading back up again, all up towards the surface, and I guess it's probably useful now to kind of talk a little bit about what we found. No doubt you're all interested in that. So, what did we know? Well, we knew the launch date of SMU 93. We also knew the date from the prop that had been scrubbed in France, which was the 10th of January 1917. So after the SMU-93 had been launched. It would therefore seem that it probably wasn't the SMU-93. We also knew the SMU-95's launch date, which was actually the same date as on the French prop. Perhaps they were the same, and that's why a lot of people thought that the one in France was the SMU-95. It wasn't until we scrubbed our prop that we found a new date, the 25th of January 1917, also after both submarines had been launched. Looking at these, it seems really obvious what the answer is. That props were fitted after the submarines were launched. Based on this, I think we can safely conclude that the submarine off France is the U-93, and that was always where it was believed to be, and the one off Cornwall is the U-95, as Innes McCartney had correctly predicted in 2006. That's pretty good news. Everything's where it's supposed to be. So the other question we set out to find is what sunk what we now know to be the SMU-95? And that wasn't something that Fran and myself solved. That piece of the puzzle seems to have been delivered by another one of the divers. The video that they've taken of the entire wreck has been uploaded into a powerful computer, and using a technique called photogrammetry, a 3D model has been produced. This 3D model shows a deep crack in the pressure hull just forward of the conning tower where the SS Braineel reported that it hit a submarine. Although not conclusive, we believe this provides further proof of the Braineel's claim that it had rammed and sunk the U-95. It's sad that this contribution to the war effort was never recognised during the lifetime of any of the participants, but I'm pleased that we've been able to right this wrong, and that the historical record will now correctly show exactly what happened during the night of 7th of January 1918 off the Lizard Peninsula. I hope you've enjoyed watching and listening to this video. I'd also like to thank Fran for allowing me to use it. As always, I'd love to read your comments, and I very much hope you'll watch another one of my videos. Thank you.